Thank you, everyone, for taking the time to join us this morning. I'm Sarah Lipton-Lubet. I'm the Executive Director of Take Back the Court Action Fund. And I am just so grateful to be joined by the speakers you'll be hearing from today. These are the folks who are doing the work, day in, day out, on the ground in states across the country on the front lines of the fight for abortion access. They know what's at stake, and they know what we need to do to address this crisis. You know, I've spent my entire career in the fight for reproductive rights. That's what brought me to Take Back the Court and to the movement for court reform. Because anti-abortion politicians have spent decades working to capture and rig the courts so that they could impose their will on the rest of us and deny us the ability to decide for ourselves what's best for our own lives. And that's why any strategy to protect abortion rights has to include a plan to rebalance the Supreme Court by adding justices. I am thrilled to begin this morning with two of our incredible congressional champions. But before I turn it to them, I have two brief programming notes. First, please hold your questions until all the panelists have spoken. We'll open it up at the end for questions. And second, Senator Markey had wanted to be here with us this morning, but was called away at the last minute. And so he sent us a brief video that we'll share later on in the call. Thank you, Senator Markey. So without further delay, I am thrilled to introduce Representatives Mondaire Jones and Veronica Escobar, tireless champions in the fight for justice to reform the Supreme Court and protect our fundamental rights. Representative Jones, thank you so much for being such an amazing leader on these issues, and I'll turn it over to you.
Well, good morning, everyone. And thank you so much, Sarah, for inviting me to speak here today. And of course, thank you to all the groups and the advocates who are on the line today for voicing your support for Supreme Court expansion. This is a critical moment for our democracy. And the need for Supreme Court expansion has never been more urgent. We saw just 2 weeks ago that this Supreme Court is ready to end the fundamental constitutional right to an abortion. If Justice Alito's draft opinion moves forward, it will have devastating consequences for millions of Americans trying to make their own healthcare decisions. 6 far-right justices, unrepresentative of and unaccountable to the American people, will end legal abortion for millions. Black and brown women in particular will shoulder the burden of abortion bans across this country as they face more barriers to access the means and the services to receive the reproductive health care that they need. But we don't have to let this opinion become law. We can restore balance and integrity to the court by expanding it, by adding seats. The Constitution gives Congress the power to change the size of the court, and indeed, Congress has used that power 7 times before in our nation's history. This moment demands that Congress use that power once again. I introduced the Judiciary Act with Hank Johnson and Ed Markey last year because I, and many of my colleagues, saw where this court was headed. I saw what they had done to dismantle the Voting Rights Act and suppress people's right to vote, despite the fact that Congress had reauthorized that law nearly unanimously in 2006. And we know that if the court moves forward with overturning Roe, they will not stop there. Justice Alito made clear in his draft opinion that the court has set its sights on our other fundamental rights, from the right to contraception, to the right to marry someone of the same gender, to the right to marry someone of a different race. I am so glad that many of my colleagues understand the urgency of this moment. We now have 60 members of Congress signed on to this important bill to add 4 justices to the Supreme Court. And with your support, we can get more and prevent this extremist 6-3 majority from overturning Roe, but only if we pass it now. So I'm grateful to all of you for stepping up to build this movement to expand the court and protect reproductive rights. And I want to turn things over to my colleague and a very powerful voice in this fight, Representative Veronica Escobar.
Thank you so much, Representative Jones. And let me first share with everyone on this call how grateful I am for your leadership. You really have led the way. You've been such an important voice in Congress. You've been such a key critical voice on the House Judiciary Committee. And you have, to me, represented the best of America. And it's my privilege to be able to work with you, especially on this issue. To our advocates and to our reproductive freedom champions, thank you for your tireless work. I can't tell you how grateful I am to all of you as well. This is really hard, grueling work. These are very difficult, challenging, and in some ways demoralizing times, but you all keep fighting. You all keep working. You inspire me so much, and I'm just incredibly grateful to all of you for everything that you do as champions for all Americans. So let's take a look at how we got here. We have a Supreme Court that, in my view, completely lacks integrity. And how did we get this Supreme Court? We got the current Supreme Court majority because we had people who were willing to bust norms and practices and traditions. We had a brazen willingness to steal seats. We had a shockingly illegitimate process. And that's what got us here today to what is now a highly political majority on the United States Supreme Court. I think many of us who believe in norms and traditions never imagined that we would have seen the taking of the Supreme Court by Mitch McConnell, even in his time in the minority, actually, especially during his time in the minority, in a way that just completely delegitimizes the tradition and the history and the work before the Supreme Court. I will tell you all, I didn't make this decision lightly to join the effort, but what I see ahead of us really is a Supreme Court that is run by Mitch McConnell and by a far-right majority that wants to turn back the clock. The current threat right now that we're talking about today is the threat against women who want to be able to make decisions for themselves. And I want to warn everyone. I know that my Republican colleagues say, well, but Justice Alito said that we shouldn't worry that this is going to impact other rights. I want everyone to remember that the majority was made up by people willing to lie to Congress and willing to lie to the American public. So their word, frankly, the word of the majority should not mean a whole lot to us, those of us who believe what they do instead of what they say. And so the risk ahead, and I think this is very important for Americans to understand, right now they're coming for those of us who believe that people should have self-determination over their future. But for those who consider themselves safe from this Supreme Court or safe from this radical Republican agenda, just know they're coming for you too. It's only a matter of time. So we've got to do what we can, what is within our power to restore integrity to the Supreme Court and essentially to ensure that hard-earned civil rights and human rights remain intact. And there's only one way right now to ensure that that happens, and that's to take back the court through this legislation. And I'm so proud to be a part of this effort. I'm so proud to stand alongside these great champions for equality and for freedom. And I am committed to the work that we have to do ahead. Thank you so much to everyone. I think I will now turn it over to Rebecca Hart-Holder, who is the Executive Director of Reproductive Equity Now.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman. I just want to start by saying what an honor it is to be on this call with both Congresswoman Escobar and Congressman Jones. It is a real privilege as a big fan of yours here in Boston, Massachusetts. So as the Congresswoman said, I am Rebecca Hart-Holder. I'm the Executive Director of Reproductive Equity Now, and we fight for the full spectrum of reproductive health care, including abortion access. I also want to take a moment to thank my incredible home state senators, Elizabeth Warren and Ed Markey, who have been out out front on the fight for this issue, as well as my own Congresswoman, Ayanna Pressley, who's been a supporter of court expansion. I wish that we did not have to be here this morning, but unfortunately, the far right and the anti-abortion movement has hijacked the United States Supreme Court and left us not with a system of justice, but with a system of political games. And let me be crystal clear, as the Congresswoman said, overturning Roe is not the far right's end goal. The court is coming for contraception. They are coming for same-sex marriage. They are coming for our trans kids. And even if the Senate passes the Women's Health Protection Act, which you've all seen in the news, this court has not shown in good faith that it would uphold the law. The Senate should be engaging in serious debate about the composition of the court and take steps to make urgent democracy reforms, including passing things like voting rights legislation. This court has refused to uphold the protections of the Voting Rights Act. It's disenfranchising people of color and low-income people across the country. And these are the same people who are disproportionately impacted by these extremist abortion bans. And it's time for the Congress to seriously engage on court expansion. And I also want to take a moment to acknowledge and thank the reproductive justice groups like We Testify and All Above All for their bold leadership and for already speaking out in favor of court expansion. A reproductive justice leader that some of you may know, Renee Bracy Sherman, forcefully said, abortion isn't a divisive issue, it's a gerrymandered one. We cannot sit idly by. And that's why I'm so proud to stand with my state coalition partners, Avow from Texas, Cobalt from Colorado, Pro-Choice Connecticut, Pro-Choice Maryland, Pro-Choice Missouri, Pro-Choice North Carolina, Pro-Choice Ohio, Pro-Choice Oregon, Pro-Choice Virginia, and Pro-Choice Washington. As state advocates, we are on the very front lines defending abortion access in our communities across the country every single day in red, purple, and blue states. We are on the ground working with movement partners, assessing needs, and we know what this moment demands. The fight to protect abortion rights must include the fight to expand the Supreme Court. And with that, I am honored to turn it to my friend and colleague, Kellie Copeland at Pro-Choice Ohio.
Thank you, Becca, and thank you, Sarah, and all the organizers for the opportunity to be here today. I'm Kellie Copeland. I'm the Executive Director of Pro-Choice Ohio. And when we heard the news about the leak and what was in that draft decision, to be honest, we were heartbroken. And our first thoughts were of all the patients and the workers at clinics and what they were going to be facing that week, the fear, frankly, the terror that was going through everyone's minds. We know, because we were the first state to fight the 6-week ban, that even when these things are debated, people are terrified because they don't know if they can get the care they need. They start calling clinics and saying, can I get help? Is it still legal? And people begin to wonder, is it still legal to go get the health care that they need? So we know a lot about what a post-Roe world is going to look like, because for so many people in Ohio, we've already been there. We've had over 30 restrictions in the last 10 years. And it's because of gerrymandering. We have one of the most gerrymandered states in the country. And we're supposed to have new districts now. We should have had them last fall. We just had a primary where we didn't get to vote because they're stalling. And they're doing that because they want to rule us. They don't want to represent us. And that's the problem at the US Supreme Court as well. The majority on that court was nominated by presidents who were not elected by the majority of Ohioans or majority of Americans. We are going to be ruled if we do not, and not represented, if we do not make change. Right now in the state of Ohio, this very moment, there are hearings on a trigger ban that would ban all abortions in Ohio with no exceptions, not even to save the life of the patient, not even to save our lives. There's so much that we can do if abortion becomes illegal in terms of helping people find self-managed care that's safe, or trying to get them to sanctuary states where abortion will remain legal. What can I do to save someone's life if they're having a pregnancy complication and it's illegal for a doctor to save their life? This is going to impact everyone. I think people need to understand this. That's why we must expand the court to save our human rights, to save our lives. And the people, this is going to touch everyone, but the people that are most impacted already by these racist and economic barriers that we already have in Ohio are Black, Indigenous, and people of color, low-income people, trans and non-binary people, LGBTQ people in general, young people, Appalachians and rural people in Ohio, people who don't have access to care already. And what has happened here in Ohio has been cruel and it has been dangerous. We cannot surrender to this tyranny. We must fight back. And it's time that we reform the US Supreme Court. That is supposed to be where our human rights are protected when the other branches of government fail. This is critically important, and that's why I'm so grateful to everyone who's working on this effort. I also want to highlight that today they are also working on legislation that would ban trans kids, even with their parents' permission, from getting the health care that they need. So many vulnerable people are going to be hurt if we don't take back control of the government that's supposed to represent us. People's lives are on the line here. This is not a political issue. This is a people issue. That's why we're imploring everyone to get serious right now. This is not a joke. I'm sorry. With that, I want to turn it over to my colleague Karen in Colorado, who, I got to be honest, like what they're doing there, the way, knowing that they are standing so strong and that they have protections and people have been able to go there and be refugees and get the care they need, is such a beacon of hope for places where we don't know what the future is going to be. So thank you, Karen, and your team.
Thank you, Kellie, and thank you everyone for joining us this morning, echoing the gratitude that others have shared. So my name's Karen Middleton. I'm the president of Cobalt. Cobalt is a state-based Colorado organization, and we both protect abortion rights and the full spectrum of reproductive health care. We also run an abortion fund and practical support fund, meaning travel, babysitter money, anything anyone needs to come here. And I'm concerned. When we heard the news of the leaked Supreme Court decision, we knew what it would say. Honestly, we were surprised by the timing, but we fully expected that they were going to strip away the rights of so many to access abortion care. And as others have said, it's only the beginning. We know that they're coming for other groups next who are impacted. And the Supreme Court is so wildly out of touch with the reality of people's lives. I think one of the things I observed on the ground is how many people were taken by surprise, how many people didn't really believe that the court would overturn Roe v. Wade through the Dobbs decision. And why do I say that? Because the norms that the Congresswoman mentioned were believed by a lot of people, and they thought that it would be okay, but it's not. You know, we have had to litigate through the courts to protect abortion access, and if you can't rely on the courts, you must expand the Supreme Court. So let's talk about Colorado. We just passed the Reproductive Health Equity Act a month before the Supreme Court document was leaked, just in time, that protects the fundamental right to abortion access. But before that, we have been a state that has allowed abortion access with no restrictions. And so we've been a safe haven already for people who have to travel from anywhere else in the country, or frankly, the world, if they need to access abortion care. And we're going to be as ready as we can be to help as many people as possible. But I like people to think about what what other medical procedure would you need to leave your state to access? And how outrageous it is that we are putting people in cars for 12 and 13 hours. We're flying people across the country to access basic reproductive health care. It's just simply unacceptable. And for the Supreme Court to oversee this rollback that is going to impact so many states, we will do everything we can to expand care in Colorado. We're working very rapidly to do that. But when you tell 26 states that abortion care is no longer available, the rest of us are going to be seeing a great burden. So we really are leaning into this notion that we need to push back on all fronts. We need to expand the Supreme Court as one of the key principles, and the other policy areas such as voting rights, because democracy and voting rights and who gets represented, as Kellie said, is hand in hand. And so we're here for anybody who needs access to an abortion. We will not be impacted by the court decision, at least not immediately, but we will be affected because we will be helping people who have to come through heartbreaking stories. And we just hope they know we're here and they know that we will step in and meet that void. So I join my partner organizations in saying to please support the expansion of the Supreme Court. Let's build this energy and move forward. And now I'm going to turn it over to Mallory in Missouri. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Karen, and thank you all. My name is Mallory Schwartz. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the executive director of Pro-Choice Missouri. Pro-Choice Missouri is the state's leading grassroots organizing and political advocacy organization fighting for abortion rights. We also run a clinic escort program that supports patients in 3 regional clinics in 2 states in getting access to their appointments, walking past the hostile and aggressive lines of anti-abortion protesters. Missouri is one of the 26 states with a trigger law, but Missourians have effectively lived in a post-Roe world for years because of the extreme and hostile actions of both our state legislature and our state government, together making abortion virtually inaccessible in the state. The level of ideological extremism that we see on the ground on issues from abortion to voting rights to attacks on trans youth and communities left us fully expecting that this day would come and the court would overturn Roe v. Wade. That expectation didn't soften the anger and fear and frustration that I felt upon learning the news of the leak. To echo the Congresswoman earlier, I felt demoralized and honestly, I felt tired. This news and fight compounds the urgency that we feel on this issue every single day in Missouri and have for years. And that's why we need to fight at every level and we need Congress to act. We will tirelessly champion WIPA, but we're here today because it's clear that legislation to safeguard abortion access is important, but not enough. Roe was not enough. We also need a court that won't overturn that legislation, and we need leadership at every level fighting to protect the people on the ground who are going to be harmed. Anti-abortion politicians didn't lead decades-long fights to destroy Roe only to have legislation get in the way. And unless we take back the court, 6 conservative justices, 6 ideological extreme justices will subvert that very legislation that folks have worked so hard to advance. For politicians who claim to support access to abortion, they need to start with 3 steps. 1, ending the filibuster. 2, enshrining abortion rights into law. And 3, expanding the court. And if you don't support those 3 steps, you can't tell me that you're serious about protecting access to abortion. That is the base level we need to do to protect, once again, the real folks on the ground who are going to be devastated and harmed by not being able to access the care that they need. And to echo my colleagues, we know that that's going to be Black, Brown, other people of color, Indigenous communities, immigrants, people with disabilities, youth, trans and LGBTQ communities who are already facing the most barriers, and all those struggling to survive on low incomes who who don't have access right now, much less what access will look like in July. We do have one thing on our side. Abortion rights advocates are some of the smartest, fiercest, passionate people around, and we always rise to the moment. And it's time to do it again. So our agenda must include court expansion before it is too late to do anything at all.
Thank you so much, Mallory. Thank you, Kellie, Karen, Becca, everyone that we heard from today. Honestly, I'm just sitting here with the power of your stories, the reality of what is happening in your states on the ground, the frankly bleak situation that Kellie shared with us, the work that's happening in Colorado and in Massachusetts to create some sort of relief valve for the crisis that we're all going to be facing in this country together, and the power of Mallory's call to action. As I said when we started, and it's all the more true now, I'm just so grateful to be in this fight with all of you. I'd like to open it up for questions right now. If you have a question, please use the raise your hand function in Zoom, and we will call on you. Just going to give it a second to see if anyone wants to get in there. All right, well, it looks like we may have answered all of your questions in advance. Oh, here, I'm sorry, I see two. Aaliyah Bailey.
Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for being here this morning. Sarah, I just wanted to ask, and this may be moving forward a little bit, but what can we do to continue advocating for expanding the court here on the ground locally?
Thank you so much for your question. And it's exactly the right one, because this fight takes all of us together. So if you're here today, that means you're engaged and you recognize what the problem is. And we're so glad to have you with us. Reach out to your congresspeople. Tell them that court expansion is absolutely essential to the fight for abortion rights. As Mallory said, if you're not looking at structural Supreme Court reform, you are not serious about the fight to protect abortion access. We've heard today what's happening on the ground, what needs to happen. So reach out, tell them to support the Judiciary Act of 2021 and get involved with these groups on the ground in your states, with organizations like the ones we have today on this call, with abortion funds. There's so much important work happening, and it needs all of our support. So thank you so much for that question. Let's go to Shane, please.
Hello.
Hi, Shane, we can hear you.
Okay, so I'm with MB.com, and my question is, expanding the court only works if the justices align with your ideology. So how can we guarantee that expanding the court will not end up with the same composition, like conservative dominated composition of the Supreme Court? How will the legislation work to expand the court?
Great. Thank you for your question. I'll jump in and open it up to others if you'd like. But look, if we have the votes to expand the Supreme Court, we have the votes to fill the seats. And so that's how this is going to work. And that is how we're going to bring balance back to this institution that has been so corrupted and had its integrity so undermined by all the machinations and manipulations that have happened. Does anybody else want to weigh in, or should we move on to the next question? Okay, great. Amy, I see your hand.
Hi, good morning. Amy Littlefield from The Nation. Thanks for having this call. I wanted to ask what the state leaders are calling for or hoping to see from some of the national reproductive rights groups in terms of calling for court expansion. And if some of you could elaborate on sort of why it felt meaningful to get together as state groups, especially in some of the most impacted states, to make this call.
This is Karen. I think where I would start is that I think the reason that the state-based organizations came together is because we're seeing the impact on the ground and the immediacy of this issue. And frankly, there have been national reproductive health rights and justice groups working on these issues at the federal level, and we're where we are today. So obviously whatever we were doing wasn't working. And so I think that the real shift here is that focusing on seeing how the states lead and following our lead. I will tell you, just even going back to nominees for the courts, which sort of addresses the last question, we knew that Neil Gorsuch was going to be a problematic justice here in the state of Colorado, and we worked hard to try to push back. And at the time, we were told, oh, no, he's not so bad. Oh, he's great. We had Democrats supporting him. We had a lot of sort of public support that was out of step with the reality that we knew. And so I think looking to us, focusing on our lead and seeing what we're seeing on the ground, especially during these devastating times, and in fact, investing in overturning some of these state legislatures is probably where I would put energy while we call on Congress to support expanding the courts.
Can I jump in?
Please.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you for the question. I think that to kind of build on what Karen was saying, in Missouri, we have an anti-abortion veto-proof supermajority, and we know that we're playing a long game. And yeah, in recent years, we have seen, this year we have nearly 100 applicants for our endorsement from districts across this super conservative, red, hostile state. That means that folks are out there and they do not feel represented by the court that we have today. And the actions, to echo Karen, of national groups often uphold the status quo. And I am so lucky to have it here in St. Louis and Missouri, Congresswoman Cori Bush, who is never afraid to challenge that status quo and has been outspoken on this issue of the need to expand the courts. And so I think to the first question too, no, we don't know that we'll be able to get ideologically aligned folks in tomorrow, but we're okay playing a long game and we're used to it. What we need is the space so that we can have something that is more representative of the actual people. Missouri has 7 in 10 folks who oppose political intervention in their ability to access abortion, political interference in their ability to access abortion. And that mimics or is similar to the 8 in 10 Americans. And so what we have is leadership at the national level that does not represent the people. And this is an opportunity to change that.
Thank you so much, Mallory. Does anyone else want to address this? Okay, great. And thank you, Amy, for that question. I'm going to give it one more moment. It looks like we may be done with questions, but I just want to make sure everyone has a chance to get in. And we do have one more from Tripp Brennan, please.
Hi there. My name is Tripp Brennan. I'm with Blue Tent. I have 2 questions. The first is, have you seen any significant movement on acceptance or support for court expansion since the leaked opinion came out? And the second question is, what can small donors do specifically to help with efforts for court expansion?
Great. Thank you so much, Tripp. In the days since the leaked opinion has come out, we have seen poll after poll that shows that the American people are frankly horrified by what this court is doing. We have seen the court's disapproval rating skyrocket and its approval rating plummet. We have seen an increase in support for court expansion. And even before the leaked opinion came out, we saw that a majority of Americans believe that court expansion will help support our democracy, will improve our democracy, because frankly, that's what it will do. And I think with every action that this court takes, and mind you, that we don't even have the final opinion yet. We haven't even seen we know the damage that it will do in states, but we haven't even seen that play out yet. And I think, the more that we see, the more that the court does, the more that support for expansion is going to continue to grow. And I should note that I hope we never see this opinion play out in the states. It will be a tragedy, but that's where we are, and that's the reality that we have to grapple with. And that's why the work that every speaker on this call this morning is doing is so critically important, brave, and really clear-eyed about the work ahead. To folks out there who want to be supporting the work, please support the organizations in your communities who are growing this movement on the ground. They need all of us chipping in to do this work together. I don't know if any of the other speakers want to weigh in on this question or ways that people can support your work, but I'd love to open it up to you.
Yeah, I'd just love to say quickly that I think you've had a taste of some of the extraordinary leadership that we see in Ohio and Colorado and Missouri on this call. The states have been leading this charge. They understand what we need to do in the fight to expand and protect abortion access and really push back against a far right tilted court. And I also want to note that for small donors, we testify, and all above all, two very important reproductive justice groups have been out front on this and deserve your recognition and support.
Thanks so much, Becca. And I think that is such a good and empowering question to end on, because we do not have to settle for what we're being fed right now. We can bring this fight. We can win this fight together. As Mallory said, it may be a long fight, but that's how we make change, and that's how we make change together. Before I close out this call, just again, my deep, deep gratitude to all of the speakers, to all of the other abortion rights organizations who are coming out powerfully today in support of court expansion, but aren't on this call with us. You'll hear more from them later on this morning. And I would like to close with, as I mentioned, some remarks and thoughts from Senator Markey, who has been such an incredible champion in this work.
Right now, our nation's highest court stands at one of its lowest moments. An illegitimate far-right majority on the Supreme Court is poised to overturn Roe versus Wade and take away the right to a safe abortion, undoing almost 50 years of precedent and plunging millions of Americans back in time to the days when far too many faced not only a loss of liberty, but a loss of life. This will create horrific pain and hardship on people all across the nation, especially those without the means or resources to travel to states where abortion will remain safe and legal. This war on women, on pregnant people, LGBTQ people, people of color, and the poor is already being waged, and we can't let the Supreme Court provide deadlier weapons. If the extremist right wing of the court is willing to abandon something as fundamental as the right to privacy and the right for an American to make decisions about their own body, then we are on a slippery slope to the undoing of other fundamental rights the court has recognized as grounded in the right to privacy, including the right to use contraception or the right to marry whoever you love. Again, I ask my Senate colleagues, what other judicial outrage, what other stripping of constitutional rights, what other evisceration of fundamental rights must we endure from this illegitimate Supreme Court majority before we act? We must abolish the filibuster now. Expand the Supreme Court now so that we can protect the rights of everyone in our country now.
Thank you so much, Senator Markey. And I couldn't say it better myself. We've got to do this and we've got to do it now. Thank you all for joining us this morning. Take care.